Dads. Can't live with 'em, can't live without 'em. It would be a severe understatement to say that Todoroki Shoto has some daddy issues. Born into a position of both power and status, Todoroki is made aware of Endeavor's plans for him at a young age. Obviously, these plans backfire and lead Todoroki to resent his father, but how does this background help us understand Todoroki's role in the main story? Well, by learning about the power struggle within the Todoroki family, the audience ultimately gains a deeper understanding of society in the My Hero Academia universe. This is why, to help illustrate this point, I've dubbed Todoroki the Lost Prince. Before I begin this discussion, make sure to share in the comments whether or not you agree. If you do agree, share some moments that you think make Todoroki a great character. If you disagree with the idea of Todoroki as the Lost Prince, what do you think his role is in the main story? Also, I'd like to give a shout out to @OdaDuck over on Twitter for sharing the last hero highlight on Deku. A link to that video is in the description below. If you too would like a shout out in the next hero highlight, make sure to share this video on Twitter and tag me @Shonen_OG. With all that out of the way, let's get into the story of My Hero Academia's Lost Prince. Father-son conflicts are a classic tale of rebellion against the patriarchy. Obviously, fathers have always held a position of power in the household, and this is true for greater society as well. Traditionally, fathers have served the role of dominance, controlling what goes on in the household. To be clear, I am not advocating for this patriarchy, but simply acknowledging its existence as a social phenomenon. Likewise, I refer to the child as son in recognition of the fact that shonen protagonists are typically boys, but what is true for sons can be just as true for daughters. Now, when you consider the fact that cities and villages are essentially families on a bigger scale, then it becomes clear that kings and other leaders act as fathers. Kings dictate the law of the land, dominating their citizens by deciding what is allowed within their realm. This relationship between kings and fathers also demonstrates the relationship between sons and princes. When a prince rebels against the king, he not only fights against tyranny, but also works to break free from the overbearing control of his father. With its roots in something as personal as family, it makes perfect sense that conflicts against the patriarchy tend to appear in a number of classic stories. Put into practice, this father-son conflict trope often dictates the nature of the story. In JoJo Part 1, Jonathan's father George is an example of a father that positively influences his son. George represents the honor and responsibility that comes with becoming a gentleman, which inspires Jonathan to live up to his father's expectations and follow the tradition of his family. In contrast, Dio's father Dario is a degenerate drunk that drives his only son to hate him. This contrast shows the impact of a character's relationship with their father on their view of the world. Jonathan is raised by a benevolent father and grows to view human lives as something to protect, while Dio is left to survive on his own and grows to view human lives as a means to an end. Of course, JoJo is only one of many shows that demonstrates the impact a father has on their son. In Mob Psycho 100, Suzuki's plan for world domination leads Sho to rebel against his father's oppression. As a consequence, even though Sho vows to stop his father, he inherits Suzuki's habit of judging others based on their powers. The impact of father-son relationships is even more evident in a show like Hunter x Hunter. Gon is a boy who is heavily influenced by his father, despite the fact that Gon knows almost nothing about him other than his passion for being a hunter. This passion inspires Gon and fuels his optimistic view of life. In contrast, Killua's father tortures and brainwashes him at a young age and never allows him to follow his own path. As a result, Killua's identity is never allowed to properly develop, and so he doesn't truly know who he is or what he wants until he becomes friends with Gon. And there are many more examples of this kind of relationship with even more variations, but what is common among all of them is that a character's upbringing will always reflect their view on life. When a father nurtures their son and raises them in a positive environment, the son will want to help others and defend those in need. When a father oppresses their son and raises them in a hostile environment, the son will often curse existence and dedicate himself to revenge and rebellion. In essence, cool dad equals good guy, bad dad equals edgy rebel. Now that we have at least a basic understanding of father-son conflicts, let's take a look into the daddy issues of Todoroki Shoto. The Todoroki family serves as a microcosm of the society born from quirks. In the introduction to the series, we are told that not all men are born equal, and this is exactly what we see in the Todoroki family. Endeavor, a hero blessed with an amazing quirk, rises to a position of power after honing his natural abilities. When he realizes his talent is not enough to succeed All Might, Endeavor uses his status to arrange a marriage with a woman that he sees as the perfect pair to his quirk, giving birth to Shoto. Actually, Shoto is the youngest of the Todoroki children, resulting from the failure of his older siblings to produce the ideal combination of ice and fire powers. Before he is even conceived, Shoto's life is set out for him by Endeavor, to succeed where he failed by becoming the #1 hero. When Shoto is finally born, he becomes the crown jewel of the Todoroki family, receiving all of Endeavor's time and effort in order to properly train him. Already, we can see how Todoroki was born with privilege. His father is the #2 hero, his parents formed a formidable combination of quirks, and his position as the only child to inherit the fire and ice quirks, as Endeavor intended, places him above the rest of his siblings. This privilege also speaks to the disparity that can be seen in hero society. In this world of quirks, heroes are powerful figures who are able to enjoy the respect and admiration of the people they serve. But this privilege is something that is determined at birth, meaning that the introduction of quirks into society has produced a hierarchy based on natural talent. Within the world of heroes, those with extraordinary quirks are able to rise above those with more mundane quirks. In the greater social hierarchy, heroes are able to live out their dreams, while those without such talent are left to lead simple lives. But even those born with great quirks can be neglected. When nurtured properly, a child grows to master their quirk and rise up the hierarchy. When a child does not receive proper guidance, their path to becoming a hero often leads them to the forgotten margins of society. Considering the hierarchy that has grown out of quirks, Todoroki's privilege becomes even clearer. He is born with an amazing quirk that automatically places him high above the lower and middle echelons of society, and even among the upper echelon, Todoroki is likely to become a top-tier hero thanks to his quirk and upbringing. Unfortunately, this privilege has a high price. While Todoroki is the most favored among his siblings, he is treated as a prized successor instead of a child to be loved. Endeavor mercilessly trains Todoroki to master his quirk, even at the tender age of 5 years old. When Todoroki wants to play with his other siblings, Endeavor tells him that they are not even in the same world as him. Of course, the heaviest burden falls on Todoroki's mother, Rei, who is adored by her son but abused by her husband. This abuse reaches its limit when Rei can no longer stand to even look at Todoroki because he reminds her too much of Endeavor, causing her to have a nervous breakdown and give Todoroki his famous scar. Todoroki had always expressed his fear of becoming his father, but when Rei is admitted to the hospital, he decides then to devote himself to rejecting his father. Now it becomes clear why the father-son conflict in the Todoroki family is so important to the story. Endeavor enjoys power and status through his role as a top-tier hero, and the Todoroki family enjoys certain privileges because of their position in society, much like nobles and aristocrats who live luxuriously because of their status. We know that Endeavor eventually becomes the #1 hero after All Might, and so we can understand Endeavor as a patriarchal figure not just in his house but in hero society as well. As such, this effectively makes Todoroki the next in line to the patriarch, in other words, the prince. But Todoroki, the prized successor of this noble family, decides to reject his father in order to overcome the tyrannical hold he has over the Todoroki family. And this is exactly what Todoroki does. He rebels against the patriarchal figure by rejecting his father's quirk, the symbol of the Todoroki family's power. So Todoroki goes on to reject his father, but what he fails to consider are his own values. Often, we see hate and tragedy in the world, and we promise that we will never do anything to cause more sadness. But one cannot simply live by avoiding the things they don't like. We must also decide for ourselves what we value. In his goal to reject Endeavor, Todoroki forgets everything else and never considers his own values. As a result, he carries the same vengeful presence as the man he has promised to reject. Ruthless and single-minded, Todoroki can only think of rebelling against his father, but by neglecting his own values, he ends up acting just like the man he hates. This is evident in the Provisional License arc, when we see how Inasa came to hate Todoroki because he gave off the same hateful and distanced vibe as Endeavor. Had Todoroki carried on with his single-minded goal of revenge, he probably would have given the same impression to even more people. This is where Deku comes in. Before the sports festival, Deku had struggled to accept One for All as his own. Because he was born quirkless, Deku admitted that receiving One for All felt like cheating, since everyone else had been trained to become heroes much longer than he had. But this guilt comes to an end after the first fight with Bakugo. After defeating Bakugo, Deku feels guilty for winning with a quirk that he wasn't born with. This guilt can be seen when he feels obligated to confess to Bakugo that he borrowed this quirk from someone else. The result of this exchange between Deku and Bakugo is that Deku declares to make this new quirk his own. Fast forward to the sports festival, and Deku is now forced to compete against Todoroki. Todoroki discovers that Deku has inherited power from All Might, and so he declares that he must defeat Deku in order to carry out his rebellion against Endeavor. Deku returns the declaration with one of his own, and when the two finally fight, Deku scolds Todoroki for using only half of his power when everyone else is giving everything they have to try and win. To get this point across, Deku tries to convince him that this power doesn't just belong to Endeavor, shouting, "It's your power, isn't it?" Hearing this, Todoroki remembers a time when he dreamed of becoming a great hero, instead of just trying to not become his father. And this is when Todoroki finally gives in and uses his left hand. Through this fight, we see a very important contrast. Deku, born quirkless, inherits One for All and must find a way to make it his own in order to fulfill his dream of becoming a great hero. Todoroki, who has always had a great quirk, realizes that he can no longer live a life dedicated to rebellion and revenge, and must now start over by rediscovering himself and figuring out exactly what kind of hero he wants to be. And this is what we see as the story progresses. In the fight against Stain, Todoroki shows us his growth as a hero when he shouts to Ida, "Look properly at what you want to be." This demonstrates that Todoroki has learned he must determine what kind of hero he wants to become, instead of simply avoiding the ways of his father. In the fight against Gang Orca, Todoroki learns that he can't become a great hero just by becoming the strongest, but must also grow to become a hero that everyone loves and respects. And so, by following the story of Todoroki Shoto, we see that a person is more than the circumstances of their birth. In a world where having a great quirk often determines one's privileges, we see that it is possible to overcome the overbearing influence of the societal hierarchy in order to live out our dreams. Todoroki starts out as a prince, but through his resentment for the hateful patriarch, he falls into the trap of hate and never-ending rebellion. Soon after, he realizes that life is worth much more than spending it on revenge. Todoroki learns that he will only become the thing he hates unless he can build a path for himself to fulfill his dreams. Having lived a life of rebellion for so long, Todoroki must now figure out who he is and what kind of hero he wants to be. This is the story of Todoroki Shoto. This is the story of My Hero Academia's Lost Prince. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed what I had to say, make sure to like the video. Also make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one, and to follow me on Twitter. Thank you, and I hope to hear from you soon.